So the idea of this session is to try and sort of take a step back from where we just were and talking about individual digital tools. This is actually kind of like recognizing this fact that there is a massive need for interoperability between all the different platforms, and tries to put forward the advantages of working using protocols instead of platforms. Because it's quite clear that everybody has their own individual choices of tools which they prefer. And ultimately, we're never all going to agree, okay, yeah, let's all use this platform or let's all use that for platform. What this session tries to say is that in the short term, while we are trying to deliver a suite of digital tools which work well for all of us, or as many of us as possible, which we co-own, that in the interim, that we can begin on that process of moving towards better collaboration just by achieving the first step, which is coordination. So it's really obvious already that there's all these different places, and you're like, often you're like, which platform do I use? Where do I go? You look at your phone and it looks something like this, and you're like, where did I get that message from that person? It was really helpful, but I can't remember where it was. And you have all of these notifications. Everything's just too complicated. This is the too many platforms problem. So one way to get around that is to switch from using platforms to talking about protocols. And I just want to take a step back here and define what I mean by a protocol. So a protocol is basically just a set of rules, right? So a protocol for a black tie dinner would be that the gents wear a black suit with a black tie and a white shirt, and the ladies wear a dress, somewhat old-fashionedly, but that is a protocol for a black tie dinner. What we're really talking about here is communications protocols. So a set of rules that determine how data is transmitted across a computer network in our sense. So an example of a protocol is SMTP. Simple Mail Transfer Protocol is the standard protocol for sending emails across the internet, which means that when I send an email here from my Mac Mail client, which talks to my own server, it can go and land all the way with Sue, who might use some completely different messaging system, some completely different client. She can still receive my email file because the message is transmitted through a simple protocol. So that's what we're talking about here, a simple set of rules which make one platform or system able to speak to another one. At the moment, when we think about the solidarity economy or the regenerative economy, the collaborative economy, whatever you want to call it, building new economies, we are hidden. We have all these myriad of different little exciting projects stopped all over the world, and they're actually on here, but you can't see them because all of these other companies that you see have marketing budgets that were mainly delivered to them by venture capitalists that they use to build these amazingly beautiful looking logos, and then they do advertising and they spam their logos everywhere and get right in our faces. So that those are the brands and the networks and the companies that we become aware of. And our little solidarity or non-extractive economy gets somewhat buried. Look, there they are. They were all there on the previous side, but you just couldn't see them. So in order to be able to navigate ourselves and to be able to coordinate effectively, we need to start to be able to join the dots between all of those little organizations that we have there in order to be able to work out how to be more effective together and also to be able to navigate our space. So maps are essential for navigation in any respect. And often when you go to one of these events or any similar other conference, people will go, oh, well, you need to map the space that we're in. And everybody goes, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's build a map. Okay, everybody give me your URL. And so somebody starts building a really nice centralized database. And then that map gets built, but it never quite goes far enough. I've never actually seen a mapping project which is like, okay, brilliant, that solved the problem for this sector, because there are many, many maps, which is what this slide illustrates. And as they get chucked in your back pocket and taken around a bit and used, they get out of date. People move, roads get built, things change. And the same is true in our digital, online, or new economy. Things are moving rapidly, organizations shift. And there is no use to a map which isn't carefully looked after. If you don't carefully look after your map, if somebody doesn't garden the garden, then it ends up looking like this sad plant. So this is where we've and when I say we, Adam and I and a few other colleagues from the Open Co-op have tried to think of a system which we could implement right now, which basically works much more along the lines of the kind of holochain philosophy, moving towards what we talked about in the last session, whereby we own our own data. What we wanted to do here was find a way of actually moving towards this straight away, enabling people to publish data about themselves on their own website, rather than needing to go and add their data to a centralized database anywhere. So the first thing that the Murmuration protocol recognizes is that pretty much every project that is already out there that's trying to do something as part of the regenerative economy probably already has a website. Here you see these little 6 examples of organizations within the regenerative economy that have their own websites. They're sitting there. And when they go and publish their updates and their blog posts, probably at the moment, they do what most of us do, which is to go and publish their blog. Then they take the information about that blog and they go and stick it onto Facebook and go, hey, look at my blog, and I hope people follow that link. Then they go onto Twitter and they go and post on Twitter the same thing. Hey, I just wrote this blog. Then they have to go onto LinkedIn and they go, hey, I just wrote this blog. And they've now made 4 posts. They've done a numerous number of clicks, whereas really all they wanted to do was tell everybody within their network that they'd just make a blog post, which they've already assigned a load of tags to, probably, if they're using a reasonable blogging platform. So instead of requiring everybody to do that, what the Murmurations protocol says is, if you just add one more file to your website, this will be able to tell the rest of the internet everything that you're doing. So let's just take a look at this permaculture farm, which might be somewhere in the UK. They're going to publish one extra file to their website, which is a JSON file. And this JSON file is going to contain all of these things. So the name of their project, permaculture farm, their URL, permaculturefarm.org, their tagline, we do great food, the purpose, to grow lovely food, and then they're going to illustrate the type of their organization. So in this instance, they would be a permaculture, farm. They can put their location, and then they can also upload their logo and which networks they are part of. So for example, they might be part of the Worldwide Organic Farms Movement, they might become part of Global Eco Villages Network, or they might be part of some sort of Permaculture UK organization. And then finally, the last thing that this JSON file will tell the world is where to find their feed. So RSS is already a really good protocol. It's just massively underused. RSS is really simple syndication. And what it does is it pumps out a feed of all the blog posts that you make on your blogging platform. So this is a fairly simple data structure, or schema if you like, for a new protocol. And what we've tried to do is base this on the underlying data schemas that come from schema.org. So we're not trying to invent anything new here. We're trying to say all of these elements already exist for every organization or project. And just by telling the rest of the world where those pieces of data are about your organization, you should be able to avoid needing to add yourself to any other maps, joining any other directories, or publishing any of your content to any other social media or sharing platform, because this index, these files will do that for you. So quickly, how does it work? We've started by building this as a plugin for WordPress, because 34% of the internet sites which exist on the world are hosted on WordPress. So we figured this isn't going to work without mass adoption. So a simple way to get mass adoption is to make it really easy for people to install in just a couple of clicks. So there is now a WordPress plugin which you can add to your WordPress website, which then goes and finds all of this information for you. So you don't even have to tell it. All you have to do is 3 clicks. You go install, and then you go to the settings and you press save. And this information will already be pre-populated, because the plugin will go and drag it out of your database. If you don't have a WordPress website, so you're part of the other 60-odd%, then you can use a JSON file creator to go and create a JSON file of your own, upload it to your website, and then tell the index where you've stored it. So once you've created these files, they ping the index and tell the index where they are, so that then the index can look at them and read the information, store it, cache it in the index, and anytime that you then re-update your information, you just need to hit save again. It goes to tell the index about that. And this looks like one big centralized index here because that's the way I've illustrated in this diagram. But the point is that there doesn't have to be just one index. This could be completely decentralized. So there could be many indexes which your data is being populated to. And then anybody else, which might include you on your website or other people within your network, can pull the information from that index or those indices, if you like, if there's more than one, to produce maps, which by their very nature are not going to go out of date because you're the person that's supplying the information to them. You could produce directories which list anything you want, just like a kind of Google directory, or you can produce aggregators, which would show mixes of RSS feeds from the news from particular types of networks within our economy that then you could filter according to various different things in a much more sophisticated way than we can currently do. You can join really simply by going to Murmurations.network/join, and it explains where you can get the WordPress plugin or how you can install your own JSON file if you're not running a WordPress website.
I've been thinking about something very similar for some time, so very encouraged to hear this.
It reminds me, and it reminds other people as well, of several things in the past. I'm thinking of description of a project dope. There are loads and loads of things which have happened, which have been tried. And I think the really interesting thing here would be to work out, if you kind of like did a bit of investigation and work out why they didn't succeed, that might be really valuable, because actually it is a really good idea. And that's why lots of people have tried something vaguely similar before. Not necessarily exactly the same, but you know, it's something along similar lines, like, I mean, a bit like RSS indeed. And so I suppose as a question, what have you done in terms of looking at all those old examples and deciding and trying to make out a case as why this is more likely to succeed than previous attempts?
Good question. Yeah, and Matt's raised something, as well as Tony, in the chat there. Clearly there's a problem here in that this isn't going to work without critical mass, just like murmurations don't look very pretty with just 5 birds in them. So you do need a critical mass in order to make this work. Hence the objective to try and target the sector of the internet which we think might pick this up, which is member organizations like us who hopefully to a large extent either use WordPress, and by making that super simple for them to do, or for other people who are slightly technically knowledgeable to be able to create a JSON file of their own. Hopefully that's going to achieve some sort of critical mass for uptake. But actually what we've recently realized is that even with just a small amount of uptake, you can still deliver a reasonable amount of value through an aggregator, because if every site is pumping out 10 or 15 news articles with only 10 or 15 sites using it, you suddenly have quite a wide array of content that could become quite useful if you can filter it in sophisticated ways. To answer the question from Tony, there's a good question there about maximum and minimum data sets. What we've tried to do here is to just have a very, very simple base schema, which is the things that I outlined in that JSON file, and then to use add-on schemas, which allow people to expand the data set if they were doing something else. So for example, if you were running an event, you might need to have an event as an add-on schema, which has things like start date, end date, location, etc. We should probably have a bit of a demonstration. So I'll pass you over to Adam and see if we can pull this off.
So we have put together a demo of the aggregation features that are built into our aggregator plugin. So this is taking the idea of what could be done with murmurations and doing a very, very basic job of demoing how it could work. So this is a map showing the nodes that are currently live on the network. Here, net res, that's org, for folks in the States. And my little island. So that's the map. We have also a directory that just shows a list. Very basic. These are the nodes that are on the network. And then we have, this is a demo of what Ollie was talking about, the feed aggregator. So this is pulling the RSS from everyone in this list. And there are ways to tweak how many posts come in and how many posts from each node. So this, you can see, Ollie has been prolific with his open co-op posts from about, I think, 6 or 7 different organizations showing up in this list. And at the top, there are filters. So these are all the tags that show up among these posts. So if we wanted to find a particular example, let's say we're interested in co-ops, and we want to find about the commons. So there's building the commons economy. We might be interested in community. Clear that. These are community-related things, or things that are tagged with the node type of community. And we can also filter by the network. We're going to get to how those fields are used in a moment. And then this is the admin for the kind of vanilla Murmurations aggregator plugin. So there you can set, using these filters, what of the nodes on the network you are including in your map, directory, or feed aggregator. So that's a brief look at what the output from the network can look at, what it can look like. But what I actually would like to do is try a demo of what the process a node would go through to install the Murmurations plugin or the JSON file and put themselves on the network. So I have here, this is a fresh WordPress install, and a made-up organization that I hope will at some point. So let's say we wanted to put ourselves on the network. Upload a zip file, which I happen to have handy. Okay, so we have Murmurations now active plugin. If we go in settings menu, get the Murmurations admin. So this is pulled from the data that's stored in WordPress, everything that we can find that's relevant to its base schema. So that includes the name of the site, the URL, the tagline if it's set in WordPress, the logo, and then tags that are pulled from tags that are on the posts on the site, and the URL. We could add a few things here. So we'll add mission, creating awesome currency for Cortez. And then the project or organization type, it's a co-op. So we can add from a list of existing types, or we can add open-ended types as well, since this is just a text field that could all become kind of a network, and just a bit more of a community as well. And the more precise that is, the more precise your pin on the map will be, which is important, especially when there are a lot of nodes in one area. So then we hit save, and this will bring the index.
So what Adam did there was to create a new entry. He added his node, if you like, which could be your organization or your project, by installing the WordPress plugin on his WordPress and then saving it. And if we now go back to the front end of the Murmurations directory, which just is like a very simple list showing you them all there. If we do a a hard refresh here, we're going to see the new entry in the directory pop up, which is now being pulled from the index and could be being pulled from the index into any other directory or aggregator or map that anybody anywhere around the world decides to build. So there it is at the top of the list. Bang, and it's presumably popped up on the map as well.
So we can also then rip the feed aggregator, which is what's happening there at the moment, and it'll show up. Any posts from that site will also show up on the feed list. I hope that was a simple enough demo. It doesn't take too many clicks or too much time to get yourself onto the network. If you are not running WordPress, we have a JSON file generator that's on the Murmurations Network website. So if you go to this Murmurations Network /join, you can, there's instructions for installing the WordPress plugin, but also you can use a very similar form to fill out your fields and create a JSON file that you then download and upload onto your website. You go to another link to ping the index to let the index know that you've added a node to the network, and then you're good to go. You should show the feed.
Yeah, there's some test posts from the Cortez Community Currency Co-op, Adam's mythical organization, which has now jumped in at the top of the aggregator. So we can tell that that's working by making that new installation, adding one file essentially to his website. What Adam did was to add his information to the index one time, which then got pulled through for 3 different uses. His organization got added to the directory, it got shown on the map, and it also got its posts pulled through and shared through the demo aggregator. And those are just 3 demos that we've built in order to show the kind of potential of the Murmurations protocol. What we're really hoping is that more people during this session will be tempted to go and install it on their sites, so that then between us, and anybody is welcome to do this, we can go off and build more interesting aggregators and directories, which might enable us to navigate the non-extractive regenerative solidarity economy in more sophisticated ways. If you imagine, you could quite easily extend the Murmurations protocol to do something very sophisticated for mutual credit, right? Because essentially a mutual credit directory just needs to know about offers and wants and where you are, right? So if you wanted to extend the Murmurations protocol to deal with a mutual credit network, you would just simply have an add-on schema which added offers and wants, which would enable you to do some quite sophisticated things. So that could be quite an interesting discussion.
We just explored in a bit more depth the idea that you can extend a Murmurations plugin for any particular field of interest, and in particular the complementarycurrency.org had a database which got very out of date, and it's time to update it, and Murmurations looks like a very, very good way of doing it. So they've already defined a lot of database fields and collected a lot of data on community currencies. So that's probably what we'll do next. We'll translate those fields into Murmurations fields and then see if we can publish them all somewhere. Les wondered if the whole Murmurations plugin might be using a sledgehammer to crack a nut, because he hopes that there's already a lot of local knowledge around, and wonders what are the use cases for Murmurations if people already know what's going on locally. And a lot of people are pretty plugged in.
I guess for me, the answer to that is that the people working in Australia on this awesome permaculture co-op that are now just discovering that they've got a software issue because they need some logistics software in order to be able to manage their deliveries from their beautiful little permaculture farm. They're probably suffering exactly the same problems as the awesome little permaculture project in Ireland that's doing the same thing. But because they're not aware of each other and they don't know each other exists, and the guys in Australia don't realize that the guys in Ireland have already solved that problem, we're not sharing that information across our networks. So we're reinventing the wheel. We're resolving the same problems. And part of the purpose of the Murmurations protocol is supposed to make those projects visible, make those actors aware of each other, to discover the others so that they can share their knowledge to a greater extent, which is why I think, yeah, local's great, but this is supposed to work on a kind of international basis where you couldn't possibly meet the people face to face.
So it comes back to coordination again.
But yeah, we'd be very interested to figure out and talk about ways of extending this which would make it work well for mutual credit, as we described earlier. The kind of idea of having offers and wants within your as an add-on schema really does open up the possibilities of doing decentralized currencies in quite a new and interesting way, I think. Adam, was there any summaries from your group?
Yeah, it was a great discussion, and I think also was just sort of just getting rolling when the breakout closed. It was a lot about the schema and what our plans are for that, how it can be extended, how whether we are planning sort of linked open data style linking from within the schema to other definitions or other vocabularies, the rabbit hole, as someone described it, of ontologies, and how much we want to get into that. And then we had some conversation about how is the network curated, or is the network curated, and how can bad actors or irrelevant nodes be dealt with, kept off, or excluded from aggregators. And that got into a discussion of the trust network idea with ally links. And also we had someone there whose name I have forgotten, who worked with Transform App and other projects in Europe. He's probably on the call here, maybe you can chime in, which is super interesting because Transform App was something that we looked at kind of closely as we were looking on this. And then the discussion of what would it take, or could it be part of, what would it take to get rid of the index? Like, could we just do this eventually in completely decentralized way, where there would be links between nodes that would make it crawlable? And I'll just throw in on the topic of networks adopting this. I'm working with the Global Eco-Village Network, and we're doing a pilot for the Canadian Eco-Villages Network, which is just restarting itself. So in the next few months, we'll have a Canadian Eco-Villages Network website, which will be using at least pieces of this, probably the whole thing, as well as some more conventional data sharing stuff to show network of Canadian eco-villages with feeds and map icons and so forth. Exciting also to hear Matt, the potential of using this for, if not for mutual credit needs and offers, at least for the community currency network. That would be awesome.
Yeah, in my group, we heard from Yasu as well, who has been asked to build a solidarity economy map in Japan, and so saw this as very timely. So really happy to hear about that. And anybody else who's thinking of trying to build any kind of mapping project or any kind of aggregator or directory, we'd be really keen to talk to you. Thank you very much to Adam, and thanks for Matt for hosting, and everybody there for contributing to that session. So yeah, just while Adam's getting that booted up, I see Matt and Daryl there in the chat committing to build a Drupal module for this, which would be really awesome. Would give us obviously increased coverage.
And Simon also says he's happy to advise about standards and protocols. There was some conversation yesterday about how the schema could or should be or was linked to those other schemas that we're building on. So I could actually just show the very brief version to answer the question about the schema.org and how we're using existing protocols. This is the schema repo, if everyone can see this. this is how we define the fields that appear in the plugin. So each field has the name and a variety of the parameters that allow us to use a single JSON file to define both what the data is, what it's about, and how it's presented as an input form and how it's validated, which is what allows us to have schemas that can be sort of arbitrarily extended. And then also in this repo, the context. This is a open link data style context document for that base schema. So you can see what vocabularies we're referencing for the different fields that are used there, which is primarily schema.org, the Social and Solidarity Economy Association, I think it is, did a big project to develop a vocabulary for Social and Solidarity Economy organizations. We're using some of that, and then also the Dublin Core, some of the Dublin Core metadata things. So ideally, this still needs a lot of work, but ideally these fields are interoperable with other protocols so that Murmurations data becomes ingestible in lots of different ways and can be combined with other sources of data. I think that's the quick answer to some of the questions that have showed up in the chat.
Essentially, it was a very successful demo, and to get 4 more people through the process there in just 15 minutes wasn't too bad. Adam, was there things to feed back from your session?
Yeah, super interesting. Dove immediately into the nuts and bolts of schema development and governance and interoperability. So we had a pretty substantial amount of experience in the breakout with interoperability and schemas, and people with experience, Tony with experience in the health world, who was sharing how they govern interoperable vocabularies. And then Colm also reported that his organization is now stewarding the ESS Global vocabulary and working with the International Co-ops Association to set up a standard for describing co-ops. And that can then, so we could then kind of translate that into a murmuration schema that would be able to be pulled in by co-op organizations to kind of have a pre-prepared set of fields. And we also got some feedback on how the JSON is structured and ways that we could break out some of those comedy limited fields into more readable, more easily standardized formats. So I think it was really productive. I certainly learned a lot.